Hello everybody, this is Refresh, and I went to the Kamigawa Neon Dynasty Prerelease for Magic the Gathering Saturday, February 12th, and I just wanted to walk you through my pre-release experience. During the pre-release, you get one of these pre-release kits, and it's not usually damaged. I did that accidentally. And inside, you get a deck box. Inside the deck box, you get one spin down life counter. Mine was blue, but you can get it in one of 5 colors. There's a little hole for it to put it in the deck box. And then you also get this little pre-release guide, and it contains a little bit of art for the pre-release. And then on the back, it is a little bit of information on how to build a pre-release deck. This is very basic, but it will get you up and running more or less if you already have some idea of how Magic plays. You also get a code for packs from the pre-release. This is for Magic Arena. You get 6 booster packs. I've already redeemed this code, so don't bother trying to use this code. But if you get a pre-release kit, you'll get some packs as well. You get a promo card. Mine was the Wandering Emperor, but it can be any rare or mythic in the set. You also get a bunch of cards that you can use for double face cards in the event that you don't sleeve your cards or that your sleeves aren't opaque and so you can see the backs of the cards. You want to use these instead. And then you get 6 packs of Magic the Gathering. Kamigawa Neon Dynasty is a bit of a surprise in terms of the fact that we're going back to Kamigawa, because the original Kamigawa block back in the day was considered one of the worst performing sets in Magic history. However, I think that there is a reason to go back, and it's because the ascension of anime and manga in American popular culture, as well as the fact that by moving into a futuristic technological world, you can incorporate a lot of tropes from not only historical fantasy Japan, but also a lot of tropes from the futuristic worlds explored by manga and anime, like, you know, giant robots, as well as giving you the ability to incorporate bits of cyberpunk and all that. And so I think that it was pretty fun, and I was really looking forward to this set. The pre-release itself, like the pre-releases for the last several years, didn't really feature anything besides a poster that you could see on the wall for the set, and that's about it. Otherwise, it was just a straight sealed deck tournament, so it lived or died on the quality of the sealed deck experience, and there wasn't much else. I wish that there was. I want pre-releases to be a little bit more special than just getting a promo card and playing sealed deck, but that's not where we're at, and so this is the set. So this is everything that I opened. In addition to 1 gorgeous plains and 1 regular plains, we have all of these cards. We opened a second Wandering Emperor in addition to the first Wandering Emperor, so it was a lock that I was going to play white, and the only other choice I had to make was what I was going to play with white. And each color had exactly 1 removal spell in it. We have Tamiyo's Completion here, we have Malicious Malfunction here, we have Flame Discharge here, and Master's Rebuke here. And I guess you can count the Spinning Wheel Kick at the top of the mana curve, but it's not exactly the best removal spell that you can get. Blue and green had the most color depth, and red had the least color depth, and so I wasn't looking to play red except as a splash. Blue had the most internal synergy and potential synergy with white in terms of some of the cross synergies. So there was a lot of ninjas in blue, and blue and black ninjas was an option as well. But again, I was going to play white no matter what, and so I had to choose either blue or black. And between the two of them, blue had a little bit more interesting synergies and a lot of card draw effects, whereas black was not quite pulling what I needed to work with what I had in white. And so this was an easy pick. I just played blue and white, and then to fill in some of the gaps, I played some artifacts. So this is a deck that I built. As you can see, there is not much in the way of removal, but having 2 Wandering Emperors be removal itself is not the worst thing in the world. And the Modern Age doubles as a creature, even though it's like 2 loot effects and then a creature, but that is also there. The deck's curve is actually fairly low, and so I opted to go with 16 cards. The Ottawa counts as one of the blue sources. On top of this, I had 8 blue sources and 7 white sources, because as you can see, the deck is mostly blue. We don't have a ton of white cards in here. but we wanted to make sure I had at least 7 white sources because the Wandering Emperor requires 2 white sources each. Now there is a lot of card advantage ability here. The Moon Circuit Hacker draws a card, the Modern Age loots, the Mnemonic Sphere loots, the Prosperous Thieves both create treasures. On top of that, we have Thirst for Knowledge and Behold the Unspeakable here, and then we can get additional card advantage from the Replication Specialist replicating the many artifacts that are in this deck. And the Papercraft Decoy can even be bounced to its own hand. If you pay 2, you draw a card. And the Searchlight Companion even creates a spirit, and that can be bounced with a ninja. And so there are a lot of ways to get additional card advantage from this deck. The only problem is that it doesn't have much removal. But the hope is that I get in there with 2s early, bounce them, get ninja value, and eventually go off. And even the Norika Yamazaki, the poet, can recast the handful of enchantments that I have in my deck, whether it's the Spirited Companion, which draws you a card, and so if you bounce out with a ninja, you're getting even more card advantage. The Moon Circuit Hacker, the Modern Age, and Behold the Unspeakable, all of those can be brought back from the graveyard, as well as the Sunblade Samurai, so there's a lot of value in this deck. But I think that even if this is possibly a slightly weaker deck than a lot of other decks because of the lack of removal, the Double Wandering Emperor kind of makes up for itself almost on its own. And so this is the deck that I brought into the games. So next I played some games. As usual for the Saturday tournaments, they were 4 matches. And so with my first match, I played against a Sultai deck. And in the very first game, I played the Wandering Emperor and basically got value off of it for the win. But it was a really close one up until the Wandering Emperor came out and surprise exiled my opponent's biggest creature. The second game, my opponent struggled with mana issues for the entire game, and I just took advantage of that and took my opponent down to a vulnerable point, at which point he was unable to stabilize against the threats that I was able to play. Plus, all the card draw helped me keep my hand loaded by the game's end. In the second match, I was up against a Golgari ramp deck, and my opponent kind of creamed me. Even though I thought I was doing alright, my opponent not only had 1 mythic dragon, they had 2 mythic dragons. And so while I was able to use the Wandering Emperor to exile the first one, by the time the second one came down, it was really, really hard for me to get back, and my opponent crushed me. The second game was a lot closer. We traded attacks back and forth, but in the end, I won just at the edge of dying because I had flyers that my opponent couldn't block, and so they had to do the best attack that they could. I counterattacked and I won. In the final game, it was another nail biter. At the very end, I pulled out of that one just by going wide. I played a lot more creatures than they did, and eventually, even with their big creatures, they couldn't stop the onslaught, and so that is how I won the final game in that match. And after that, I was up 2-0. My third match was up against an Abzan deck, and in the first game, my opponent got off to a really slow start, and I got off to a really fast start, getting a lot of ninjutsu value and a lot of card draw effects, and my opponent scooped very quickly. This was like, I want to say 6-7 turns in, they scooped. In the second game, it was basically the same exact story. My opponent had a really slow start. I had a really fast start, even though I mulliganed to 6. And so I was able to get there with a ton of value, and my opponent was, I think at that point, so demoralized by the amount of value that I was getting that they just gave up. And so even though it's not like the game was necessarily over, I think the card advantage that I got off of all the card draw effects, like bouncing my Spirited Companion back with the Moon Circuit Hacker, and then drawing a card off the Moon Circuit Hacker, and then playing the Spirited Companion to draw another card, was perhaps a little bit too much for them to handle. And so after that, I was up 3-0. Going into my final match, my opponent and I decided to split to ease some of the pressure. And so we were going to split the final packs no matter what, but we played anyways. And I'm really glad that I did that, because in the first game, my opponent did what I did to my opponent in the previous match by tempoing me out. They just bounced my cards back to my hand, and it didn't help that I was drawing my more expensive cards over my cheaper cards, and so there wasn't a whole lot that I could do. By the time that I was able to play cards, my opponent would bounce and or kill whatever cards that I would play, and they just ran over me for the win. In the second game against my Simic opponent, my first hand was 6 planes and the Sunblade Samurai, and I was pretty sure that I should not keep that hand, and so I mulliganed 6. my 6 cards included only 1 island, and so I could have gone down to 5, but I felt like because I had several 2-drops that could let me draw cards, I could keep that and survive. However, I didn't draw lands for the first 2 turns, and so I was discarding the hand size, and my opponent was just going off again, and even by the time I was able to play lands, I was forced to chump to keep my life total up, and I ended up dying pretty quickly after that. And my opponent beat me in straight sets there, leaving me with a 3-1 record. The interesting thing with this particular set and seal deck, at least, is that the first 2 matches that I played went to time, and I actually only eked out wins in the final turns before the game was over and we would draw. And so one thing I wanted to note about this set is that it is just a ton of fun. The Limited offers so many crunchy decisions and interesting decisions to make, and the cards enable you to filter a lot of cards and draw a lot of cards, at least in my colors, and that helped to mitigate some of the mana screw issues even. I found the theme fantastic, like the incorporation of vehicles and the equipment that are also creatures created a lot of versatility, and so I felt like the hardest part about playing Kamigawa Neon Dynasty was actually cutting the final cards out of my deck to get it down to 40. And when a set is like that, when you open a sealed pool and you're not like, oh, which random 2/1 with no abilities do I keep, is a decision that I have to make. I'm just left with all these cards are good, what do I cut? And that makes just the deck building process a lot of fun. But the games are also really, really fun and interesting. I didn't know what my opponent had in their hands, and because of the presence of ninjas in every color, you're sort of left wondering, can I let this creature through or not? That also helped add a lot of tension to the game. And I think that all made the Kamigawa Neon Dynasty one of the most enjoyable sealed deck experiences I've had in a long time. Yes, I do wish that there were more to the pre-release besides just sealed deck play, but all in all, I had a really good time. I found this flavor of the set fantastic and enjoyable. And for my wins, I got 4 packs because it turns out that the win records enabled them to give the extra pack, and so I got 4 packs, and they even threw in a Zendikar Rising promo pack for me as well. And so I really had a lot of fun at the Kamigawa Neon Dynasty pre-release. So that was my experience with the Kamigawa Neon Dynasty pre-release. If you went to the pre-release, let me know in the comments how your pre-release went. If you have any thoughts about the deck that I built or the games that I played, also let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more of my videos, you can hit subscribe. This was Refresh. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.